Picture the smell of grease paint. Not the modern kind, the old sort. Tallow fat cut with zinc oxide and powdered chalk, thick as candle wax, heavy enough to feel on your fingertips even when you haven't touched it. The kind that works itself into the creases of your knuckles over weeks of nightly use, into the fine lines around your eyes, into the soft hollow behind your ears, until your skin holds a memory of it, even on your days off, even when you scrub with cold water and rough soap and try to come back to yourself. Now add the smell of a dressing room shared by 11 men in various states of undress, in a building that hasn't been properly aired since the Crimean War, gas lamps flaring too close to the walls, cheap cologne applied with desperate generosity, stage fright, which is a real and specific smell, mostly just a large number of people sweating heavily in a very small space, and underneath all of it, older and harder to name, the smell of something kept hidden, the smell of a secret. That's the Gaiety Theatre, Backstage, London, 1887. And the moment you walk through the stage door this morning, you did something that, if the wrong person discovered it, could send you to prison for 2 years. Not the performing. The performing is perfectly legal. Female impersonation has been part of the English stage since Shakespeare's time. Since before that, since women weren't permitted to appear on stage at all, and boys played Juliet and Cleopatra, and every weeping woman in every tragedy that ever made a paying audience cry. No. What could send you to prison has nothing to do with the wig you're about to put on. It has nothing to do with the corset or the silk or the painted face. It has to do with where you went last Tuesday. The address on Vere Street, the door with the blue lamp, the name you were told to whisper, and the room you found on the other side of it, full of men who laughed like they hadn't laughed in months. Men who looked at you, not at the character you played on stage, not at the woman you constructed out of horsehair and whalebone and rouge, but at you, at the specific and particular person you actually were. Parliament passed the Labouchere Amendment 2 years ago. 1885. Any act of gross indecency between male persons, 2 years hard labour, minimum. No exceptions for consenting adults, no exceptions for private behaviour, no exceptions for the men who cheered for you from the pit every Thursday night and left flowers at the stage door every Friday morning. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. We always get ahead of ourselves with stories like this. The danger is so much easier to talk about than the person standing inside it, trying to keep their hands from shaking. So, let's begin properly. Let's begin where you begin. Your eyes open to a ceiling you've been staring at for 4 months. The plaster is water-stained in a shape that looks almost like a running dog, and every morning you find the dog again and feel, stupidly, a kind of relief, like it's proof that the night passed and here you still are. The room is on the 3rd floor of a lodging house on Catherine Street, 2 streets from the theatre, 6pence a night. Shared with a comedian named Arthur Sykes, who snores on his back with his mouth open, catching air, and a scene painter named George Marsh, who sleeps like a man who has simply stopped participating in the world. The smell when you wake up is the smell of 3 working men in a room with 1 small window that doesn't open properly. Sour sleep sweat and the faint coal smoke that gets into everything in London. Into the walls, into the curtains, into your hair, even when you've slept with a cloth over your head. Arthur's boots are somewhere very close to your face. Arthur has strong opinions about keeping boots near the bed in case of fire, and absolutely no opinions about the smell of his own boots. You are Thomas Albright. You are 21 years old. You've been in London for 11 months. which is long enough to know which streets flood when it rains and which coffee stalls give you a proper measure, but not long enough to feel like anything here belongs to you in any permanent sense. You came from Salford. Your father drove a delivery cart. Your mother took in mending. You told them you were going to be an actor, and they looked at each other with the particular expression of two people who have decided not to say the thing they are thinking. You did not tell them what else you were going to be. You didn't know yet when you left. You were just running towards something, the way you do when you're 20 and Salford feels like a room with no door. The church bells are going, not nearby. The nearest church is St Mary le Strand, 3 streets south, and its bells are big enough that you feel them slightly in your chest more than you hear them with your ears. That's 5 o'clock. The sky through the gap in the curtain is the particular deep blue-grey of London early morning, which isn't the blue-grey of anywhere else, because London early morning has coal in it, has the faint yellowish tinge of 10,000 domestic fires, not yet fully extinguished from the night before. Arthur's snoring catches and stutters and continues. George has not moved. You sit up. Your back aches. The mattress is filled with what might charitably be described as a mixture of straw and historical textile fragments, and it has a pronounced dip in the middle that ensures you spend the night slowly rolling toward your own centre of gravity, like water finding its level. Your mouth tastes of the cold mutton pie you ate at 11 o'clock last night, standing outside a shop on the Strand because there was nothing to eat in the room, and you were too tired to walk further than the nearest pie man. The mutton was mostly pastry. The pastry was mostly air. You were grateful for it anyway. You dress in the grey light. Your own clothes are unremarkable. A plain cotton shirt that's been through too many cold water washes, brown trousers with a patch on the left knee that you sewed yourself and which is, objectively, not a very good patch. Suspenders. A jacket that was a reasonable jacket about 3 years ago, and is now a jacket that has arrived at a kind of dignified exhaustion. You're not a wealthy young man. Stage work pays irregularly, and in amounts that would make a Salford factory owner laugh, if factory owners laughed at anything other than their own ledgers. You have 11 shillings and 4pence in your trouser pocket. This represents your current total wealth. You owe the lodging house 14 shillings, and will have more coming on Friday if the box office was reasonable this week, which it usually is on weeks when they're doing the burlesque, because London audiences will forgive a mediocre melodrama, but they will pay good money to laugh at something ridiculous. The Gaiety Theatre does a great deal of things that audiences pay good money to laugh at. That's why you're there. Outside, Catherine Street is already awake. London doesn't really sleep. Not properly. Not the way smaller places do. There's always a cart somewhere. Always a voice. Always the sound of something being done to prepare for the coming day. A delivery boy is arguing with a horse at the end of the street. 2 women are walking quickly with their heads down, wrapped against the October cold, breath coming in small white puffs. A dog is investigating something in the gutter with the focused attention of a professional. You turn toward the Strand and walk. The morning air is cold enough to make your eyes water immediately. This is the particular cold of London in autumn, which is not the clean cold of the countryside, but the cold of 10,000 chimneys, all breathing at once, the cold of a city that has been burning things since the Romans, coal now, coke, wood, tallow, and has wrapped itself in its own exhaust for so long that the cold and the smoke have become the same thing. You breathe it in. It tastes faintly of sulphur. It coats the back of your throat in a way that feels almost like nutrition. which says something about your morning diet. You are going to get breakfast at a coffee stall on the Strand that opens at 5:30 and sells hot coffee for a halfpenny and a piece of bread with dripping for another halfpenny. This is not a luxurious breakfast. It is, however, hot, which in October London is a value that cannot be overstated. The man behind the stall is called Jim, and he never asks your name or where you're going or what you did last night. This is one of Jim's most appealing qualities. "Coffee," you say, and Jim pours it without looking up, and you wrap both hands around the tin cup and feel the warmth move up through your palms and into your wrists and up your arms in the particular way that heat does when you've been cold, long enough that heat becomes almost emotional. You drink it standing at the counter watching the Strand wake up. Cabs beginning their morning circuits. A newspaper boy setting up his stack on the corner, calling the headlines in a voice that sounds far too alert for 5:30 in the morning. A woman in a very good coat walking with the deliberate speed of someone who has somewhere important to be, and would prefer not to be noticed getting there. The bread and dripping is everything a piece of bread and dripping can be, which is not much, but it's filling. The dripping has been rendered from beef fat and has a faint meaty sweetness that coats your tongue. You eat it quickly. You have to be at the theatre by 7. Here is something you should understand about a Victorian theatre before the audience arrives, before the performers arrive, before anyone arrives except the people who actually make the thing run. It is a different building entirely. The gaiety sits on the Strand like a confident older gentleman, all dressed, Portland stone and decorative ironwork, and signs advertising the current production in large letters that can be read from a moving cab. But the front of a theatre is a promise made to the public. The inside of a theatre, the real inside, backstage, below stage, in the flies and the paint shops and the property rooms, that's where the promise is manufactured, and manufacturing is not a romantic process. You go in through the stage door, which is on Exeter Street, which smells of the alley that runs alongside it, and the bins that are placed near the door, and always, always, the distinctive underlayer of gaslight and dust and old canvas that is just the smell of what theatres are. The way churches smell of stone and incense and the accumulated prayers of centuries. The doorkeeper is Mr. Hobbs, who is approximately 70 years old and has worked this stage door since before you were born and possibly before your parents were born, and who greets you with a nod that conveys neither warmth nor hostility, but simply the acknowledgement that you are a recognised element of the morning and can be admitted. Mr. Albright, Mr. Hobbs, and you're in. The backstage in the morning is a place of purposeful noise and specific smells. Carpenters working on the set for next week's production. There's always a next week, always something being built while something else is being performed. Their hammers making a sound that travels through the floorboards and up through the soles of your feet. The property master, a small, intense man called Davies, sorting through baskets of props with the focused energy of a man who takes seriously the question of which parasol goes with which costume in which scene, and will become visibly distressed if this question is handled improperly. The wardrobe women moving through the corridors with armfuls of fabric, navigating each other with the ease of people who have been doing this in this narrow space for years and have developed an unconscious spatial awareness of each other's bodies. You report to Miss Clement, who runs the wardrobe department with an authority that makes the theatre's actual manager seem decorative by comparison. She's a woman of perhaps 50, iron-haired, with the posture of someone who has spent her entire life fighting fabric that does not want to behave, and she has developed opinions about Thomas Albright specifically. Her opinion is that you have good bones for this. Good bones is a wardrobe woman's way of saying that your face takes the makeup well, and your shoulders aren't too broad, and your hands can be made to look right with the correct gloves and a bit of powder over the knuckles. It is not a poetic compliment. It is an assessment. But you have learned to take it as one of the better things anyone has said to you in 11 months. You're thin, she says. She says this every morning. She doesn't mean it as a criticism. She means it as a practical observation, the same way she might note that the hem needs taking up or the bodice is showing strain. You are thin because you're 21 and living on coffee and dripping and whatever the other members of the company leave when they finish eating. And Miss Clement is aware of all of this, and it informs her opinion of your dimensions. Yes, Miss Clement. They've altered the dress from last Thursday, she says. The blue one. Extra ruching at the back. It'll make you look like you've got hips. Will it work? She gives you a look that says the question is slightly beneath both of you. She's never yet failed to make someone look like they had hips. The blue dress is hanging on a form in the corner. It's silk. Not real silk. Not the kind that comes from China and costs accordingly, but a theatrical silk that achieves the effect of silk at a fraction of the cost, which is the general principle of everything in a theatrical wardrobe. It catches the gaslight and sheens faintly blue, the colour of a pigeon's throat. The ruching at the back is new, gathered into a small waterfall of fabric that will, from the audience's perspective, create the impression of a bustle, and therefore of a waist, and therefore of a woman. From 3 feet away in full gaslight up close, it is obviously constructed. But nobody in the audience is 3 feet away. They're 40 feet away in the dark, and they want to believe. That's what they've paid for. This is the thing about theatre that nobody who hasn't worked in one quite understands. It is a collaborative act of shared imagination. The audience knows that Thomas Albright is a man from Salford putting on a dress. They are not deceived. They choose to see something else for the duration of the performance, and in that choice, in that willingness to believe in the face of evidence to the contrary, something real happens. Something that cannot be explained entirely by the makeup or the dress or the trained voice dropping to a register, that suggests femininity without quite achieving it. The audience consents to a magic trick, and the magic trick becomes real. This is why you love it. This is the thing that got you out of Salford in the first place. There is a man at this theatre named Henry Graves. He plays the dame in the pantomime. Widow Twankey, the Good Fairy's comic counterpart, the role that has been made for a man in women's clothes since pantomime first crawled out of the Italian commedia tradition and put down roots in England. He has been playing it for 15 years. He is 43 years old, and he has a face that was never going to be the face of a romantic lead, and has found in this realization a kind of freedom. Because if you were never going to play the handsome young man, you could play something else. Something larger. Something that exists outside the ordinary categories. Henry Graves walks into the dressing room at 7:30 every morning of production week and sits down at his mirror with the deliberate ease of a man arriving at his proper place, and he opens his makeup case, a leather case, battered at the corners, with a monogram stamped in gold that's almost worn away, and he begins. You have watched him do this every morning for 4 months, and you have not yet stopped being fascinated by it, because what he is doing, technically, is applying theatrical makeup. Greasepaint base, white lead powder, kohl for the eyes, rouge for the cheeks and lips, the careful penciled brows. This is craft. This is learned skill. Any competent theatrical makeup artist can do what Henry Graves does in a technical sense. But there is something else happening. something in the progression of the transformation that goes beyond the mechanics. He starts as Henry Graves, a middle-aged man with grey at his temples and laugh lines cut deep, and the particular exhausted alertness of someone who's been making other people laugh for a long time and has paid for it in unspecified ways. And he ends as something that doesn't have a precise name. Not a woman, not a parody of a woman, not Henry Graves either. Something that lives in the space between those things. Something that the audience, every single night, reaches toward across the darkness of the pit, because they recognise it. You're watching him work one morning in the second week of October, when he catches your eye in the mirror. You're staring, he says. His voice is the voice of Henry Graves, not of whatever he's becoming in the mirror. It is a voice roughened by decades of projecting to the back of large rooms. It's flattering, but it's also slightly unnerving. Sorry, you say. Don't be sorry. Ask what you want to ask. And this is the thing about Henry Graves. He has known what you are since approximately the third week of your employment at the Gaiety, and he has made this known through the particular tactic of never saying it directly, and always making clear that he already knows. It is a kindness. It is a form of recognition that costs him very little and means an enormous amount to you. Because in 11 months in London, you've spent a significant portion of your energy managing the thing you're very carefully, carrying it inside you like a piece of broken glass you're trying not to let cut through. How do you know when to stop, you ask? With the makeup. How do you know when it's right? He considers this seriously. He has picked up a brush and is working the kohl around his left eye with a concentration that doesn't preclude conversation, because he has been doing this long enough that his hands know what they're doing without requiring his full attention. There's a moment, he says. You'll know it when you find it. There's a moment when what you see in the mirror stops being you trying to look like something and starts just being the thing itself, like a key finding a lock. You'll feel it more than see it. Does it happen every time? He looks at you again in the mirror. Some mornings it takes longer, some mornings you're tired and the glass has gone wrong, or the gas is throwing yellow light and everything looks muddy. Some mornings you sit here for an hour and feel like nothing more than a man in bad lighting making a fool of himself. He puts the brush down. And then someone out there. He gestures vaguely in the direction of the stage, the auditorium, the 3,500 seats of the Gaiety filling up every night with people who have paid to be here. Some person out there is watching you and something in them shifts, something opens, and they laugh or they weep or they just sit forward in their chair because they need to be closer to what they're seeing. And that, he picks up the brush again, that is not nothing. That is quite specifically not nothing. The dressing room is filling up around you, the other performers arriving, the comedian Arthur who shares your lodgings, his real face remarkably different from his stage face, which is a version of his face that has been organised toward cheerfulness with specific cosmetic interventions. The chorus boys, young men mostly, some barely older than you who navigate the strange territory of theatrical employment with the adaptability of people who've been told from childhood that they're talented enough to survive whatever the world throws at them. The principal boy, which is a specific kind of theatrical category you've been slowly understanding. A woman who plays a young man, which is the inversion of what you do, and who does it with a particular swagger that comes from years of practice. Her name is Mary Forrester, and she is 28 years old, and she is, objectively, the most technically accomplished performer in the company, and she knows it. And the knowledge sits on her like a coat she's been wearing long enough to forget it's there. She has dark hair cut short under her wigs and strong hands that she keeps very still when she's not using them, and eyes that see a great deal more than she generally acknowledges in conversation. She looks at you this morning just for a second as she passes to her mirror. It's a look that means nothing in particular, and also means clearly that she has made a decision to include you in the category of people worth looking at. This is not a small thing in the social geography of a theatre company. "How's the blue dress?" she asks. "Miss Clement says it'll make me look like I've got hips." "You haven't got hips. That's why there's ruching." She almost smiles, turns back to her mirror. "You have the feeling you've passed some kind of minor test. The morning is rehearsal, the afternoon is preparation, the evening is performance. This is the rhythm of a working week at a Victorian theatre, and it has its own momentum, its own particular gravity, and when you're inside it you stop being able to feel the edges of your ordinary life, because the ordinary life is very far from where you actually are, which is in a bright, controlled, artificial world where everything means something specific and everything is in its correct place. The rehearsal this morning is for the third scene of the second act, which involves an extended comic confusion about letters, not an original plot, in which your character receives a letter intended for another character, and the resulting misunderstandings require approximately 20 minutes of increasingly frantic physical comedy to resolve. You've done this scene 11 times in actual performance, and 30-odd times in rehearsal, and you know it as well as you know anything, which means you can do it without thinking and still find the thing in it that makes it real each time. A small adjustment in the timing of a look, a half-second's delay before a reaction, the particular way the audience goes very slightly quiet just before a laugh, the in-breath before the out-breath, and if you can hit the in-breath, if you can reach into that half-second of held anticipation, you can make the laugh bigger. You have been learning this for 11 months, and you are still learning it. Henry Graves could tell you it takes a lifetime and be telling you the exact truth. The stage in the morning, without lights, is a grey and practical place. The flats are visible as what they are, painted canvas on wooden frames, not a drawing room, not a garden, not a ballroom. The rigging is visible above. The chalk marks on the floor are visible. The X that means stand here for this line. The circle that means this is where the furniture goes. You know all the marks. You know the geometry of the stage in your sleep. The stage manager calls places and the scene begins, and for the duration of the scene you are not Thomas Albright. Not exactly. You are something that contains Thomas Albright the way a bottle contains water. You can see it in there. You know it's what you are, but the shape of it has changed. The hands that take the letter have a different quality than your hands usually have. The voice that reads the letter aloud has a pitch and a texture that isn't quite yours. The expression of dawning miscomprehension, the moment when the character begins to understand that something is very wrong without yet knowing what, is an expression you've practiced in mirrors and refined through performance until it sits on your face so naturally that you sometimes catch it in your actual reflection and have to remind yourself you're not on stage. Henry Graves watches from the wings. This is something he does. He will say, when you ask him, that he's watching to see if the sight lines work, to see if the fourth scene flows naturally from the third. This is true, and it's also not the whole truth. He watches the way a craftsman watches someone learning the craft, with the attention of assessment, and when the assessment is favourable, the slight relaxation that comes from seeing something done correctly. After the rehearsal, just past noon, You're eating a pie. Proper beef this time, from the shop around the corner that Henry Graves has officially endorsed as the best pie within 4 streets of the theatre, which he considers the relevant radius of comparison, sitting on the edge of the stage with your feet hanging over the orchestra pit. When Henry Graves sits down next to you with a cup of something hot and looks out at the empty auditorium. The Gaiety, empty, in the middle of the day, is a beautiful room. You don't always notice this when you're in it. You notice the smell, the particular compound smell of velvet seats and gas and floor polish, and the faint lingering ghost of every production that has ever been performed here. You notice the size, 3,500 seats. That's 3,500 people who will be here tonight, all of them looking at this exact spot. That's a lot of attention coming from a single direction. When you're used to being the kind of person who moves through cities making themselves small, who calibrates their face and their voice and their manner to produce exactly the impression that will draw no particular notice. The idea of 3,500 people looking directly at you is both terrifying and deeply, embarrassingly attractive. I heard, says Henry Graves very quietly looking at the empty stalls, that you've been speaking to Patrick Sears. You eat your pie, the beef is good, the gravy is slightly too salty, but in a way that suits the situation. Patrick Sears, who's a dancer, a good dancer technically, with dark eyes and a way of standing that suggests he's always about to move, always poised on the edge of some action, who has been working at the Gaiety for 3 years and who, 2 weeks ago after the Thursday performance, stood next to you at the stage door as you were both waiting for the last of the autograph seekers to leave, and said something very quiet about knowing some fellows who met on Tuesday evenings, and would you be interested in joining them for a drink? The way he said it, the specific quality of the quiet, the way his eyes didn't quite meet yours when he said it, but his body was turned toward you, the careful neutrality of the word fellows. You understood. You understood immediately, and the understanding was like a door opening that you had known was there and had been afraid to approach. Yes, you say, still eating the pie. And did you go? I went. Henry Graves doesn't ask where. He already knows where, which you also already knew, because Patrick Sears is someone Henry Graves has known for a long time, and the network of people who know each other, in the way that Patrick Sears knows Henry Graves, is not a large network. It is a carefully maintained and very specific network, and it operates through exactly this kind of adjacency. A word at a stage door, a conversation that seems casual and isn't, a door that opens when someone says the right name in the right tone of voice to the right person. Vere Street, Henry says, not a question. Yes. A pause. He drinks whatever is in his cup. Steam rises. Was it? He seems to consider how to phrase the question. What did you think? And here is the thing. Here is the thing that has been sitting inside your chest for 2 weeks, since Tuesday, since the door on Vere Street opened onto the sound of men talking at normal volume in a room where they were not afraid. The thing that you've been carrying around the streets of London, and through the rehearsals and the performances and the mornings of coffee and dripping, unable to put down and unable to look directly at. I thought, you say, and stop. Start again. I thought it was the first time I'd been anywhere in London where I wasn't, where I didn't have to. You eat the last of the pie. It's gone cold. Yes, says Henry Graves. That's it exactly. That's exactly what it is. Let me tell you something about Molly houses, because you need to understand what they were before you can understand what happened inside them and what it meant and why the men who found their way through those particular doors were willing to risk what they were risking to get there. London has had hidden places for as long as it has had secrets, which is as long as it has been London. Every city of sufficient size generates its own underground geography, its hidden rooms, its private clubs, its places where the rules that apply in the daylight world are suspended or replaced by different rules. This is a fundamental human impulse, the need to have somewhere that is yours, somewhere that belongs to the people inside it and is organised according to their own terms. Molly houses were that place for a specific and particular population in a city and a century that had no legal provision for their existence and would imprison them for it if it found out. The word Molly. It goes back further than you might think, 18th century at minimum, possibly further. It was the word used for effeminate men, men who dressed in women's clothing at gatherings, men who had particular relationships with other men who organised themselves into communities that had their own customs and their own celebrations and their own vocabulary. The word didn't mean exactly what any modern category would mean. Categories are a later invention. What existed in the 18th and 19th centuries was something messier and more human than a category. A group of people who found each other and built a world together because the world outside wouldn't accommodate them. The original Molly houses, the ones that historical records mention from the early 1700s, from the reign of George I, from the time when the Society for the Reformation of Manners was running raids and publishing names and causing the kind of public shame that destroyed lives in an afternoon. Those places were run out of taverns and private rooms, sometimes by the landlords themselves, sometimes by specific women who took money to provide space and discretion. Mother Clapp's house in Field Lane, which the records describe as having a large room set aside for Mollies who gathered there on multiple evenings a week, a place where men danced together and called each other by female names and performed mock marriages and did all the things that their ordinary lives had no room for. Mother Clapp was tried and pilloried in 1726. Her customers were arrested. Some were hanged. The public response to the trials was what you'd expect. Disgust, performed outrage, newspaper accounts written in a tone of scandalized horror that sold very well. The machine of public condemnation moving with its full weight. And then, within a few years, the houses came back. Because the need didn't go away. The need never goes away. You can remove a specific place from a map. You cannot remove what the place represented from the hearts of the people who needed it. So they found other rooms, other landlords willing to take money for discretion, other addresses whispered at stage doors and in certain coffee shops, and at the particular corners of parks where people who needed to find each other had learned to find each other. By 1887, by the year you're living in, the houses are more cautious and they are smaller, and they move more frequently, because the Labouchere Amendment has sharpened the official attention. 2 years hard labour. That is a real and immediate threat. But they are still there. The need is still there. Vere Street is one address. There are others. There will always be others. But I want to explain something specific about the culture of these houses in the 1880s, something that connects directly to the stage door and the dressing room, and the man with the grease paint and the blue silk dress. The performance tradition in the Molly houses, the female impersonation, the mock marriages, the elaborate social rituals that mirrored and played with the conventions of respectable Victorian society. This tradition overlaps, in a very specific way, with the tradition of the theatrical dame, the man who plays the woman on stage, the man who occupies the space between categories and finds there not a limit, but a freedom. The men in the Molly houses loved the theatre, loved it with the specific intensity of people who recognise something in a cultural form that the wider culture doesn't intend for them to find there. The pantomime dame, the female impersonator, the comedian in drag. These performers were not, in most cases, themselves Molly men. They were performers. They were doing a job. The joke of the dame is, in the conventional pantomime reading, a heterosexual joke. The incongruity of a large man in women's clothes, the comedy of wrongness. The joke being that of course it's a man, of course it's not real, and isn't that funny? But for the men in the houses the reading was different. The dame was something else. The dame was evidence that it was possible to stand up in front of 3,500 people and be not quite one thing or the other and have the crowd love you for it. Evidence that the space between categories was a real place where a person could stand. Evidence that someone had found the words, or not words exactly, since the dame doesn't explain herself, doesn't articulate the thing she is, had found the form, the physical form, of something that the audience felt was true even while they were laughing at it. The great dame performers of the Victorian stage were, in the houses, treated as saints, as icons, not because they were themselves part of the community. Most weren't, and some would have been horrified to know, but because of what they represented, what their presence on stage demonstrated every night, in front of thousands of people who had paid to be there. And you, Thomas Albright, 21 years old from Salford, thin and cold and slightly in debt. You've become, in the 2 weeks since the door on Vere Street opened, something unexpected. You have become, to the men in that room on Vere Street, a person of particular significance. Because you are young enough to be interesting and skilled enough to be convincing, and more than that, you are someone who carries the line between the stage and the house inside you, in a way that neither element is quite separate from the other. You perform on stage, you perform a category that doesn't fully exist. You come to the house, you are recognised. The recognition moves in both directions at once, and the friction of it is exactly, specifically, the energy that has been keeping you awake since Tuesday night, lying on your mattress listening to Arthur snore and staring at the ceiling dog. After the noon conversation with Henry Graves, the afternoon passes in the way afternoon passes in a working theatre, in preparation, in small tasks, in the gradual movement toward the evening that the whole day has been aimed at. The wardrobe is assembled, the face is constructed. The characters put on over the person like a layer of something. Not a disguise, not quite, more like a lens. The way a lens doesn't conceal what's behind it but changes the light so you can see differently. You're in the chair at 5 o'clock. Miss Clement stands at your left shoulder. In the mirror your face is still your face, slightly drawn, slightly tired, the particular colour of someone who doesn't eat quite enough and doesn't sleep quite enough but is 21 and can still sustain these deficiencies without showing them too severely. Miss Clement picks up the greasepaint base. It's the colour of skin, but slightly more so. Theatrical skin. The skin the footlights want to see. Calibrated for distance and gaslight rather than for natural light. She applies it with a brush, and it goes on in smooth, wide strokes, and your face changes, not disappears, changes. The individual details, the slight unevenness, the natural variations in colour, smooth into something more uniform, a surface, a starting point. You watch it happen in the mirror. You've done this 40-odd times now. You still watch it happen every time. Eyes, says Miss Clement, and you close them, and she works around them with a smaller brush, and the coal goes on, and when she says open, and you open your eyes, the face in the mirror has eyes that are larger than your eyes usually are, that have a depth and a definition that the gaslight will pick up from the back of the house and read as not femininity exactly, but expressiveness, the capacity to convey something across a distance, the rouge, the lips, the penciled brows, each step precise, practiced, quick. And then she picks up the wig. The wig is brown, dressed in an elaborate upswept style of the kind that respectable women are currently wearing, the kind you see on the fashionable women walking on Piccadilly and in the parks. It has been constructed by a wig maker who has strong opinions about historical authenticity and even stronger opinions about what works under a gas spotlight, and these opinions generally align, which is why his wigs hold their shape through an entire performance, even when the person wearing them is moving at speed and occasionally falling over things for comic effect. Miss Clement sets it on your head, pins it in place, checks the position in the mirror, steps back, and there it is. The moment Henry Graves described. The key and the lock. You are not Thomas Albright. You are also not the character, not yet. The character requires the dress and the stage and the other performers and the audience creating the fourth wall you can push against. But you are not Thomas Albright either. You are something that lives in the interval between those two states. Something that the mirror shows you without quite being able to name. You know why the men in the Molly House look at certain performers the way they look? You know it now in your body rather than just in your head. Because what you see in the mirror is proof. Proof that the categories are not as solid as they are presented to be. Proof that a person can occupy an interval, can be genuinely and fully in that interval rather than only passing through it. Proof that the interval is real. Well, says Miss Clement with the precise tone of someone who has just confirmed a professional judgment, there's your hips. The performance is good. They are almost all good at the Gaiety this season. The company is experienced and the production has been running long enough for everyone to have found the timing, to know where the laughs live and how to build toward them, and how to let them breathe. You make the audience laugh 7 times in the second scene. 5 planned, 2 accidents of timing that you caught and used before you'd consciously decided to. This is a ratio you are proud of. In the wings, between scenes, you stand in the specific backstage dark that is the dark next to blazing light, the gaslight from the stage throwing a bright line at your feet where you stand just outside it, the rest of the wing black by comparison. You can hear the audience, 3,500 people. From this distance, from the wings, what you hear is not individuals but the collective sound they make, the breathing and the rustling and the occasional specific laugh that peaks above the general low noise. When something works on stage, when the scene lands, what you feel through the floor is a kind of sympathetic resonance, almost like the building itself is responding. You stand in the wing in the blue silk dress with the ruching that makes you look like you have hips, in the brown wig, in the constructed face, and you feel it. You feel the current of it running up through the boards and into the soles of your feet. Mary Forrester appears at your shoulder. She's changed into her principal boy costume, young male romantic lead, which means fitted coat and breeches and boots that come to the knee, and a hat at an angle that suggests insouciance, and the particular swagger of someone who's never been required to worry about anything. She looks completely and effortlessly like a young man. She looks, in fact, like a better version of a young man than most actual young men manage. "How's it going?" she asks. Her voice in the wings is very quiet. Between scenes, backstage, the company talks in low voices as a matter of professional habit. Voices carry in a theatre. Good, you say. Scene 3 went well. I heard the laugh on the letter sequence. They held it longer than Tuesday. The timing was better. She looks at you, your full constructed face, the wig, the dress. She looks at it the way Miss Clement looks at a costume, with technical assessment, looking for what works and what doesn't, what holds up. You're getting better, she says. At the comic timing? At all of it, she pauses. You're not just doing the funny, you're doing something underneath the funny. You don't know what to say to this. The audience feels it, she says. They laugh at the joke and they feel the thing underneath. That's the difference between a comedian and a performer. She goes on. Your scene is starting. You go out. After the performance, after the curtain and the applause and the slow business of removing the makeup and the dress and the wig and becoming, incrementally, Thomas Albright again. The Albright who is thin and slightly cold and wearing the patch jacket and lives on Catherine Street. After all of that, Patrick Sears is at the stage door. He has a way of being somewhere that suggests he simply happens to be there, not that he has been waiting. This is a useful skill in his particular situation. He is 26 and has a face that is, in ordinary light, unremarkable. Medium everything, medium height and colouring and feature, but which has a quality of attention to it, a quality of being genuinely present in whatever he's looking at. That makes it interesting. There's something happening tonight, he says, if you wanted to come. Something happening. The specific neutrality of this. The specific thing that this phrase means in this context, which is different from every other context in which a person might say it. What sort of something? There's a fellow who does an act, Patrick says. Not a professional act, a personal one. Tommy Bird. Tommy Bird, a name that means nothing to you yet, and will mean a great deal more in an hour. The house on Vere Street is a terraced house 3 streets from Oxford Street, in a neighbourhood that is neither wealthy nor very poor. A middle space, the kind of neighbourhood where the buildings are tidy, and the curtains are clean, and the residents conduct their affairs with a study privacy that is not unfriendly, but is also not curious about other people's business, which is for the purposes of what happens on the upper floors of one particular building, an ideal quality in neighbours. The ground floor is a small rooms-to-let establishment run by a man named Connolly, who is a large, quiet Irishman of late middle age who, as far as the rest of the street is concerned, simply operates a lodging house. The reality is more complicated than that, and Connolly has known about the reality for 8 years and has made a business decision accordingly, which includes keeping careful track of which Bow Street constables conduct their business with a degree of financial flexibility, and ensuring that those constables are, from time to time, consulted on matters of professional interest. This is not a romantic or idealistic arrangement. It is a practical one. It functions. You go up the stairs, wide stairs, covered in carpet that has been through better decades, and through a door at the top that is opened by a man you haven't seen before, a young man with a careful face who checks something in you. Your expression, perhaps, the specific quality of your nervousness, the way you hold yourself, before standing back to let you through. The room is larger than the outside of the building suggests. 2 smaller rooms have been combined at some point. Their joining marked by a beam that runs across the ceiling and which several people are currently using as a convenient landmark to navigate toward. There are perhaps 40 men in this room. some standing in groups, talking, some sitting on the chairs arranged along the walls, a few near the window which is curtained and shows no light to the street. The noise is a room-sized murmur, not loud, not designed to be heard anywhere outside this specific space, but rich with the quality of conversations being had without anxiety. The smell, tobacco smoke, pipes mostly, and something sugary, a bowl of something being passed around, and underneath it the particular smell of many men in a warm room, which is not unpleasant but is specific. Candles burning on a sideboard, a smell of hair oil and something floral. There are flowers in a vase on the table near the door, which strikes you the first time as unexpectedly domestic. Normal. The kind of domestic detail that exists in any room where people spend time and care about the quality of the time spent there. Patrick Sears is already inside and moves through the room with the ease of someone who knows where he is and who he's glad to see. He greets two men near the window, makes a gesture toward you that introduces you without specifying you, which is the correct level of introduction in a place where specificity about who people are and how they know each other is handled delicately. You stand near the door for a moment, looking. This is the thing that gets you every time, every week since the first time. That hasn't changed in the 2 weeks since you walked in here. The quality of the room, not its content specifically, not who's here or what they're doing, the quality of it. In your ordinary life, on Catherine Street, in the theatre, on the Strand in the mornings, in the pie shop and the coffee stall and the lodging house, you carry something with you, a kind of constant low-level management. The management of how you present yourself, how you modulate your voice, how you position your body, which topics you allow yourself to follow into conversation, and which ones you redirect, where you allow your attention to go in public, and where you don't. It is not strenuous. You've been doing it so long that it's simply part of how you move through the world. The way a person born with one leg shorter than the other simply walks with a slight lean and has forgotten to think of it as compensation. Here, in this room on Vere Street, in the warm yellow light with the candles and the flowers and the 40 men talking in their ordinary voices about ordinary things, the management stops. Not gradually, immediately. You walk through the door and the management stops and you're left with the slight vertigo of a person who's been leaning against a wall that has suddenly been removed. A man introduces himself. His name is James. He's a clerk in a solicitor's office, he says. He has light-coloured eyes and an uncertain quality to his movements that suggests he's been coming here for a shorter time than Patrick Sears, but longer than you. He asks how you know Patrick. We work together. At the theatre? Yes. Something in his face opens slightly when you say theatre, the way a door opens slightly on a latch, not fully but enough to see through. I saw the Gaiety last month, he says, the second act comedian, the one in the blue dress. There is a pause in which you both consider what you're on the edge of and whether to say it directly. That was me, you say. And James's face does the thing that you are learning faces do in this room when they make a connection they've been hoping to make. The slight shift, the opening. It was extraordinary, he says, not in a theatrical sense, not meaning the performance technically, meaning something else, something he doesn't have the words for exactly, or is choosing not to use the words for, but something that you recognize because you recognize the feeling of watching someone occupy the interval. Thank you, you say. Henry Graves arrives at 9 o'clock. You hadn't known he would be here tonight, and when he appears in the doorway, No makeup, no wig, just Henry Graves, middle-aged, in a plain dark coat with a white cravat. You feel something settle, the way a key settles when it finds a lock. He sees you across the room and nods once, and in the nod is everything you need to understand about why he told you this morning what he told you. He moves through the room. He is here, as on stage, a person of a specific weight. People notice him without being obvious about noticing him. They shift slightly in their orientation. They turn conversation so he's included without being directly invited. This is the gravitational field of someone who's been seen and known by a community for a long time, and who carries that knowledge around with him without effort. A man named Charlie, who's been here longer than almost anyone, and who runs the rooms in formal logistics with the quiet efficiency of someone who understands that the logistics of a place like this, who is new, who might be untrustworthy, which evenings are safer than others, when to close early and when to extend, are not administrative details but actual safety. Charlie comes to stand near you. "First time seeing Bird?" he asks. "I don't know who Bird is." Charlie has a face organised for discretion, the kind of face that doesn't broadcast what it's thinking, but it does something now that might be almost enthusiasm. "Tommy Bird," he says, "is something you don't forget." Tommy Bird arrives at 9:30. He is not, in ordinary life, a theatrical performer. He's a tailor's assistant in a shop on Regent Street that makes very fine coats for men who have the money for very fine coats. He's 24 years old and has a narrow, angular face and hands that move constantly, restless hands, the hands of someone whose inner life has more velocity than his outer life and needs somewhere to go. He has been coming to this house for 3 years. He has been doing what he does here for 2. He carries a bag, a large carpet bag with a clasp that's slightly broken and has been repaired with wire. He disappears into the back room with the bag, and Charlie moves through the gathering crowd. There are perhaps 60 people in the room now, more than when you arrived, the density of bodies creating a warmth that makes the candles unnecessary for light and entirely necessary for atmosphere. Charlie moves through the crowd with a series of quiet words that reorganize people from groups scattered around the room into something like an audience, something like a shape that has a front and a back and a place from which to see. You end up 3 rows back from the front. Patrick Sears is at your left, James the solicitor's clerk is at your right, and he has the alert, forward-leaning posture of someone who comes to this every time and has never stopped finding it worth the alertness. Henry Graves is at the back, which is where he always stands, you'll learn, not from modesty, but from the habit of someone who has spent his whole life looking at performances from every possible angle, and prefers to see the whole shape of the thing. The lights dim. Charlie turns down 3 of the 4 candelabras. One light remains positioned at the front of the small clear space that's been created. A spotlight of sorts, warm and slightly amber. A circle of yellow light on floorboards that show the scuffs and marks of 40 years of people walking across them. A silence forms. 60 men in a room going quiet by collective agreement, all at once, the way a room will when it understands that something is about to happen. And Tommy Bird walks out of the back room. He is wearing a dress, not a costume, not the kind of theatrical construction that Miss Clement architects for the Gaieties productions, not the blue silk with the engineered hips and the horsehair bustle. This is a dress that has been assembled from pieces. The skirt is green, the bodice is black. There's a shawl around his shoulders and a small hat pinned to hair that's been dressed up somehow, quickly, and is only approximately right. imperfect in the specific way that something assembled by a person for themselves with a bag and a small mirror is going to be imperfect. And none of that matters. None of the imperfection matters because Tommy Bird walks into the circle of light and stands there, and the room, 60 men who are just breathing and existing and being themselves in this warm room. The room holds its breath. He doesn't speak immediately. He stands. He looks at the room. His eyes move across the faces in front of him with a slow, unhurried attention that is not performing looking at faces, that is actually looking at faces, at the specific people in front of him. Then he sings. His voice is not a trained voice. It's not the projected, supported voice of a professional performer, not the voice that Henry Graves uses to fill 3,500 seats. It's a smaller voice, but it is entirely his, entirely real, and what it does with the particular song he's chosen, a music hall number, a woman's song, a song meant for a female voice, and originally performed in a West End variety show by a woman in a feathered hat. What it does with that song is something that the training and the projection would not improve. He sings it from inside it, from inside the category of the woman who the song is imagined as singing. Not performing the song at a distance, as a comedian performs a song, standing outside it, showing you the joke, but singing it from the place where the song lives. The way, when you watch a person who is truly inside a piece of music, you feel the music differently than when someone is simply producing the notes correctly. The room is so quiet, 60 people, and you could hear, not a pin drop, that's too much of a cliche, but you could hear the difference between one person's breathing and another's. You could hear the wax melting in the single candelabra and making the flame flutter. You are aware of your own hands. You've been holding them at your sides and have not noticed this until now, and they are not entirely still. The song ends. Tommy Bird looks at the room. The room comes apart, not in the theatrical sense of a wave of applause rolling from front to back. It's not that organised or that formal. It's more like the release of something that had been held very still. People talking, laughing, reaching toward each other's arms, toward each other's shoulders. James to your right makes a sound that you realise is him trying not to cry and succeeding mostly. Patrick Sears is on his feet. Henry Graves, at the back, has his hands together and his face shows something that you have not seen on Henry Graves's face in the theatre. Something unguarded, something that has come out from behind the professional attention. Tommy Bird does 2 more songs. Between them he talks, not performing talking, not a comedian's patter, just talking, the way a person talks when they are among people they trust and have things to say. He talks about the week at the tailor's shop, about a customer who came in for a coat fitting and who had opinions, many opinions, all incorrect, about the sleeve length. He talks about his mother in Peckham, who has no idea where he is on Tuesday evenings and thinks he's at a working men's improvement society, which is only incorrect in the specific nature of what is being improved. He talks about a singer he saw at a variety hall last week, a real singer, a professional, a woman in a feathered hat, and he demonstrates, briefly with one shoulder dropping and one eyebrow raising, the precise quality of her performance, and 60 people laugh. The laugh is different from the laugh at the gaiety. The laugh at the gaiety is real, but it comes through the fourth wall, through the dark, through the distance between the stage and the pit, through all the formal apparatus of a theatrical entertainment. This laugh is in the same room as the person who produced it. It's immediate, physical. It's the laugh of 60 people who are laughing with something, not at it. You watch Tommy Bird take in that laugh, and you watch what it does to him. You see it in his hands, the restless hands settling just for a moment into stillness. The specific kind of stillness that comes from being exactly where you're supposed to be. After the performance, if performance is the right word, it's performance, and it's also something else, something more domestic, less bounded. After, when the candelabras are all turned back up and the room is relaxed back into groups and conversation, you find yourself next to Tommy Bird near the sideboard, where someone has set out glasses and a bottle of something dark. He pours two without asking and hands you one. You work at the Gaiety, he says. Not a question. Word travels in this room the way blood travels in a body. Quickly, invisibly, essential. Yes. He looks at you. His face, without the hat and with the dress's shawl pushed back off his shoulders, is tired in a specific way that has nothing to do with the performance he just gave. The performance has not tired him. The other 47 hours of his week have. What's it like, he asks, doing it on stage, in front of... He gestures somewhere beyond the walls, in front of 3,500 people who don't know what they're looking at and wouldn't be comfortable if they did. In front of London. It's different, you say. The audience doesn't... They don't see what you just saw. They see the joke, the character. But you know. I know. He looks at his glass. I've been to the Gaiety twice, to see Henry Graves. He means in the pantomime, in the dame role. Both times I went to the matinee because matinees you can cry without anyone particularly noticing, he says this matter-of-factly. What he does up there. He stops, tries again. It's not the dress, he says. Anyone can put on a dress. It's something else. He finds something in it that comes from somewhere real, from inside something real. And he's standing there in front of 3,000 people doing it, and they're all laughing at the joke of the dress and not seeing the real thing, and he's standing there doing both at once, offering them both, the joke and the real thing. And they only take the joke, but the real thing is also there. It's there. He looks at you. You do it too, he says. I haven't seen you on stage, but you do it. I can see it in how you're standing right now. You don't know what to say to this. I mean it as a compliment, Tommy says. I know. Good. He pours more of the dark liquid. You drink it. It's a sweetish spirit of some kind. Warm going down. Do you ever feel... You start and then can't quite find the end of the sentence. He waits. On stage, you try again. There are moments where whatever it is you're doing in the interval, in between the categories, feels like it's actually reaching them. The audience, not the joke, the real thing. And they can't acknowledge it, because acknowledging it would require them to see you, Tommy says. Yes. And they'd rather have the joke. Yes. And it's both a relief and a disappointment at the same time. Simultaneously. Yes. Exactly that. Exactly. Welcome to Tuesday nights, Tommy Bird says. November arrives cold and certain, the way November always arrives in London. Not with drama, not with a particular morning where the temperature drops sharply and you think, there it is, but with a gradual accumulation of cold that you only notice after it's been there for several days. The coal fire in the theatre's common room burns all day now. Miss Clement has added an extra layer to the blue silk dress against the chill backstage. You have acquired through a combination of personal spending and a gift from Henry Graves, who called it merely a spare, and didn't look at you when he said it. A pair of wool gloves with only minor damage at the left thumb. Your position at the Gaiety has shifted slightly, not in any formal sense. You're still what you were, a young performer in a supporting role, learning the trade by doing it, getting paid a wage that covers the lodging on Catherine Street, and the coffee and the pies, and not a great deal else. But something has shifted in how the company relates to you, in the specific quality of the attention you receive in rehearsal and in the wing, and you think it has to do with what Mary Forrester said that afternoon. You're not just doing the funny, you're doing something underneath the funny. Henry Graves mentions one morning very casually, while applying his makeup with the precision of someone doing something important, that the producer, a man named Barrett, who you have seen twice at a distance and who has a watchful quality about him that suggests he's been in the business long enough to have developed a specific sense for what he needs, that Barrett has been watching the Thursday night performances. Watching which part, you ask? Your part, Henry says. The greasepaint brush moves in his hand. Deliberate strokes. Don't let it make you nervous, he says. Being noticed is good. Being noticed for the right thing is better. What you need to know about Barrett is that he doesn't say things unless he's decided them. If he says anything to you, he's already made the decision, and he's just announcing it. What kind of decision? Henry puts the brush down, picks up the coal. There's talk about expanding the company's variety program. More burlesque acts, fewer straight melodramas. The audiences want to laugh. The Gaiety has always known this. It's possible, not certain, but possible, that there might be a larger role in the next production than the one you have now. He says this in exactly the same tone he'd used to tell you that the prop department had moved the letter to a different shelf. Even uninflected. You understand that this is how he protects you from pinning too much on it. If he told you this the way it actually feels, if he used the tone that the information deserves, you'd spend the next 3 weeks unable to rehearse properly for hoping. Right, you say. Right, he agrees. Now stop standing there and go help Davies with the props. He's been looking at that parasol for 20 minutes and he's going to make a decision he'll regret. The Tuesday evenings continue. They have their own rhythm now, their own texture. You've been enough times, 4, 5, that you know the room, know the faces, know the specific social geography of the place. You know that the men near the window on the left are the older regulars, the ones who've been coming here long enough that Connolly knows them by first name and asks after their health. You know that the 3 men who always arrive together and leave together and never quite integrate into the general conversation are doing their own very specific calculation of risk and belonging, and haven't yet resolved it in favour of belonging, and that this is fine. This is their right, that there is no expectation in this room of more openness than a person can manage. You know that Tommy Bird doesn't always perform. Some Tuesdays he comes without the carpet bag and sits in a corner with a glass of porter and talks to people and is simply present in the room, not the performer, just himself. And this version of him is different from the performer in ways that are interesting to map. Quieter, more contained, the restless hands stilling sometimes into long periods of careful attention to whoever he's talking to. He's intelligent, Tommy Bird, in the way that people who've had to make sense of their own lives without much help tend to be intelligent, practically, observationally, with a particular talent for seeing what things actually are rather than what they're presented as. He asks you one Tuesday about the Gaiety audience, specifically about the audience on nights when the dame role has a scene that the crowd goes quiet for. Not a laugh scene, but a moment of, what would you call it? Stillness. The audience doesn't laugh, it holds, the way the room on Vere Street held when Tommy sang. Does it happen? He asks. Sometimes, you say, not reliably. There are nights when the scene hits, and nights when it just goes by. What's the difference? You think about this. You've thought about it before, but not in words. I think, you start. I think it has to do with whether the person in the dress believes it. Not in the sense of delusion, not forgetting you're wearing a dress, but in the sense of it being genuinely in the thing, being in the interval rather than just standing next to it. What's the interval? The space between what the costume says and what the person inside it is. That gap, if you're fully in that gap, really inhabiting it rather than performing it from outside, then sometimes the audience finds it, even though they don't have a word for what they've found. Tommy looks at his hands. His hands are doing something, his thumb moving against his fingers in the small repeated motion that means he's thinking about something, and the thinking has a physical quality. That's what I try to do, he says. Here, in the room, without 3,000 people, with just... He gestures at the room around him. 60 men in warm yellow light. With people who can see it. Do you ever want more? More? A bigger room? He looks at you. Something in his face considers and then decides. I want this room, he says. I want this room to always be here. I want this room to be safe enough to exist. That's the thing I want. You understand. You understand more completely than you can say without saying too much. Because the question of what you want, the stage, the audience, the 3,500 people, the real and public version of the thing, and the question of what is actually safe to want, what you can allow yourself to pursue, these are not the same question. These questions are in tension with each other in a specific way that has to do with the Labouchere Amendment and the 2 years hard labour, and what happened to the men who were named in the newspapers, and the men who lost their positions and their lodgings and their families and everything they'd built. Being remarkable on stage is safe. Being recognisable as the person who is remarkable on stage, as the person who goes to Vere Street on Tuesday evenings, who knows Tommy Bird who sits in that room, is not. This is the calculation that runs underneath the performance. Underneath every brush of grease paint, every step into the circle of the footlights, every moment in the wing with the current of the audience's attention running up through the boards. You are learning to hold both things at once. The way Henry Graves holds both things at once. The art of being visible and invisible simultaneously. Henry Graves takes you for coffee one morning. A proper coffee house, not the stall on the Strand. In the week after your 5th Tuesday at the Vere Street house. It's a place 2 streets from the Gaiety, small and dark, with leather booths that absorb sound, and the smell of roasting coffee mixing with pipe tobacco in a way that is, objectively, the best smell available in this part of London. He is still in his everyday face, his own face, the face that is tired and watched and has something warm in it underneath the professional control. And he orders coffee for both of you without asking what you want, which is something he does, and which you've decided to read as affection rather than assumption. I've been doing this, he says, since 1867. This is not how he usually begins conversations. He usually begins conversations from the middle, already inside whatever he's thinking about. The dame role, you say, the dame role, and other things. He wraps both hands around his coffee cup, looks at the surface of it. I want to tell you something about what this life looks like from where I am, 20 years in. You wait. The stage gave me everything, he says. A livelihood, a particular kind of, I want to say belonging, but that's not quite right. A particular kind of legibility. When you're Henry Graves, the Gaiety dame, people understand what to do with you. You're in a category they can work with. The funny man in the dress. Everyone has a framework for that. He drinks. What the stage didn't give me, what nothing in my professional life has ever given me, is the right to be fully what I am in the daylight. You understand? Yes. The house on Vere Street, the houses before it, the houses in other cities on tour, those places, those rooms, are where that part of me exists, as a real thing. Not as a joke or a performance or something that's been made safe by putting it in a context where people can laugh at it and therefore not have to reckon with it. He puts the cup down. The men in those rooms, he says, the ones who come every week, they look at you, at me, and what they see isn't the costume. What they see isn't the punchline. What they see is something that took me 20 years to understand was real. And the looking, being seen that way, is something I cannot. He stops, starts again. There is no version of my life in which I would give that up. There is no level of risk that would make me give that up. You need to understand this before you go much further into this world, because you're going to have to make the same calculation, and I want you to make it clearly, with your eyes open. You look at him, his face in the dim light of the coffee house, the real face, the tired, watchful face with the laugh lines and the slight grey at the temples. What is the risk exactly, you ask? I mean, I know what the law says, but what does the risk actually look like in practice? He considers. It looks like a man who talks to Connolly and seems friendly and comes 3 or 4 times, and then one morning there is a constable at the door and names are given. It looks like a journalist who gets a tip and writes something that doesn't name names directly, but is specific enough that everyone who knows the geography of this city knows exactly what's being talked about. It looks like a fellow apprentice who notices you're not where you said you were on a Tuesday evening and mentions it to someone who knows someone. He picks up the cup again. It doesn't usually come from nothing. It comes from trust placed incorrectly, from someone who seemed safe and wasn't. From the ordinary human error of believing that because a thing feels right and good, it must therefore also be protected. A pause. You should know, he says, that Connolly is careful, very careful. He's been doing this a long time and he has not lost anyone yet, which is a record he is professionally proud of. But careful doesn't mean safe. Careful is the best you can be. Safe is a luxury not currently available. You sit with this for a moment. The coffee is good, strong enough to mean it. Are you telling me not to go back, you ask? He shakes his head. One single, definite movement. I'm telling you to go back knowing what you're choosing. Those are different things. December arrives. The pantomime season begins. The Gaieties production, not Cinderella, not Dick Whittington, but a burlesque of a classical theme that gives the company room for the elaborate set pieces and extended comic sequences the audiences come for, runs for 4 weeks and is, in the assessment of the stage newspaper's critic, a considerable success, particularly in the comic performances. Particularly, the critic writes with the specific quality of appreciative bafflement, in the work of a young performer named T. Albright, whose female impersonation scenes have a quality that is rather more than merely funny. The article is read aloud in the dressing room by Arthur Sykes, in a tone of affectionate mockery that is his primary register of affection. Miss Clement does not read it aloud. She cuts it out of the newspaper with scissors and pins it to the corner of her mirror, and when you look at her for a reaction, she simply says, "I told you there were good bones," and turns back to the wardrobe. Henry Graves reads it, somewhere private, and says nothing at all, which is its own thing entirely. Barrett, the producer, who has the watchful quality and the habit of not speaking until he's decided, speaks to you after the second week. He says very little. He says that the season is going well. He says that the company is looking at the spring programme. He says that there may be a vehicle, which is the theatrical word for a production built around a specific performer's strengths, that might suit your particular abilities. He says this, and then he looks at you in the specific way of someone waiting to see what you do with information. You say, "I'd be interested to hear more when there's more to hear." He nods. The conversation is over. You have apparently said the correct thing. Henry Graves, when you report this later, says, "Good. Don't mention it again. Don't ask about it again. Let it come." How long will it take? These things take as long as they take. If you push them, they collapse. If you let them breathe, they might become real. You let it breathe. It is one of the harder things you've ever been asked to do. In January, something changes at the house on Vere Street. Nothing dramatic. Connolly mentions to the regular men that there's been some interest in the neighbourhood. Not official, not yet, but a quality of attention from a constable on the regular beat that wasn't there before, a quality of noticing. He changes the evenings, no longer Tuesday. Wednesday now, 1 week, and then the following week Saturday very early, and then a gap of 2 weeks entirely, during which the men who know each other from the room see each other in the ways they see each other when the room isn't available. The stage doors and the coffee houses and the parks in the afternoons, the careful adjacencies that keep a network alive when its central gathering place is temporarily dark. This is the nature of the life, the management of it, the constant calibration of what is available and what is not, what is worth the risk today, and what must be set aside for a later time when the risk is lower. Tommy Bird keeps the carpet bag in his room at his lodgings, and he doesn't bring it out except on the evenings when Connolly has confirmed the room is running, and on those evenings he carries the bag through the streets of London like any man carrying any bag, head down, steady pace, unremarkable. You walk with him one evening from the neighbourhood where he lives. He's moved since you knew him, from a room in Holborn to a set of rooms in Bermondsey, over the river, where the rent is lower and the landlady's interest in his Tuesday evening whereabouts is lower still, to the house on Vere Street. It's a long walk in cold January air, past the river, across Waterloo Bridge, up through the Strand. He walks quickly, not because he's nervous, but because he's always moving quickly, always ahead of himself slightly. The restless quality of him applied to locomotion. Waterloo Bridge. This is something you should know about. London's bridges are something you learn when you live here, the way you learn anything that's essential to daily navigation. Gradually, through use, through the accumulating experience of crossing them in different lights and different weathers and different states of mind, until they become as individual as people, and you have opinions about them, preferences, the way you prefer certain streets to others without quite being able to explain why. Waterloo Bridge in January at 9 in the evening is lit by gas lamps placed at intervals along its length, each one throwing a small warm circle that doesn't reach the next one. So the bridge is a series of lit islands in the dark with the Thames black and large below and the sound of the water. Not a sound exactly, more of a presence, a moving absence of silence on both sides. The city lights reflecting in the water from Lambeth and Bankside to the south, from the Strand and Whitehall to the north, their reflections shifting and dissolving in the current. Tommy stops in the middle of the bridge, not for long, just for a second. Do you ever think, he says, looking at the water, about what it would be like if none of it, if the Labouchere thing had never happened, if the law was just different sometimes? What does it look like when you think about it? You look at the city, the lights on the water, the movement below the movement, the current making the reflections articulate. I try not to get too specific, you say. Getting too specific about something that doesn't exist becomes its own kind of pain. Yes. He looks at the water a moment longer. Then he picks up the bag and starts walking again. What does exist, he says, is the room. Yes. And the room is enough to make the other thing bearable. Yes. You cross the rest of the bridge in silence. Not an uncomfortable silence. The comfortable kind. The kind that exists between people who have passed the point where silence requires justification. Let me tell you something about the men who are icons in these rooms. Because this is the real subject of tonight. Not just the room and the risk, but the specific people who the men in these rooms looked at and reached toward across the darkness, the way an audience reaches toward a stage. The people who represented something, Henry Graves, you know. But Henry Graves was not performing expressly for the rooms. He was a theatrical professional who happened to also exist in the rooms, and the rooms claimed him as their own, partly because he was known, and partly because what he did on stage resonated, but he was not a product of the rooms. Tommy Bird was something else, something specific to this world. A person who had found, in the rooms, the only stage available to him, and who had made of that stage something genuine and luminous. But Tommy Bird was not the only one, and not the first. The tradition goes back further than you, goes back before the Gaiety, before the West End as it exists in 1887, back to the earliest days of the music hall and the penny gaff, the rough and ready entertainment venues of the East End and South London, where the working classes went to be entertained in the 1830s and 1840s and 1850s. Those places had their own performers, their own female impersonators, and those performers had their own relationship to the houses. A man called William Dorset, who performed as Willie the Widow in the halls of Southwark and Bermondsey in the 1850s, was the name that was spoken most often in the older houses, spoken with a specific quality that is the quality of names that have become significant in a community's memory. He died in 1861, before anyone in this room was performing, before most of them were adults, and there are men in the rooms tonight who are told about him by men who saw him, who passed the memory down the way a community passes a memory that matters, carefully, with specificity, preserving the details that make it real. What they say about Dorset, what was preserved and passed along, was not about his technical skill, though the technical skill was apparently remarkable. What they say is about a specific night in a room in Bermondsey, a room not unlike the one on Vere Street, when he did something that no one had words for at the time, and that has been described in the telling and retelling in multiple ways that are all approximately the same way. He stopped performing. He stopped being Willie the Widow, stopped doing the character, stopped the comedy and the patter, and he stood in the room and sang, just sang, from somewhere so honest and so clearly himself that the 30-odd men in the room could not breathe. After which he put the character back on and finished the evening with a comic song, and the room came apart laughing, and he went home and went to work the next morning at the textile factory where he spent the daylight hours of his life. This is the tradition you have walked into. This is the lineage. There are other names. An actor named Frederick Staines, known in certain venues as La Frederica, who performed at legitimate theatrical venues in female roles with a skill and a commitment that earned him genuine critical praise, while his private life was conducted in the rooms and the parks and the careful adjacencies of a city that offered no legitimate space for it. Staines was arrested in 1872 in a situation that the newspapers reported with the standard language of that era's moral horror, language deliberately vague in its specifics and deliberately amplifying in its tone. He was not convicted. His case was discharged on a legal technicality that may or may not have involved money changing hands in a specific direction. He left London that year and was, as far as the rooms were concerned, simply gone. One of the names that becomes cautionary without becoming entirely known. They are the ones who were never arrested and never known, and whose names survived only in the rooms, passed among the men who were there. A young man from Whitechapel called Ben, who had a voice of a quality that people in the rooms compared to the professional singers at the Strand venues, and who disappeared one year, not arrested but married off by a family that had begun to notice things, packed off to a wife in Nottingham, and a position in his wife's father's business. What happened to Ben in Nottingham is not something the rooms could ever know. But the quality of his voice was remembered. This is the nature of a hidden history. It is made of specifics, of what was said and how it was said, and what a specific voice sounded like in a specific room, and of absences. The gaps where names and stories were lost because the conditions for preserving them didn't exist. The names that were never written down because writing them down was a document of something that wasn't supposed to exist. You're standing inside one of these gaps. You're one of the people whose existence this history will, in most tellings, not quite have room for. And what happens in the rooms on Vere Street, on Wednesday evenings and occasionally Saturday mornings, and in the careful adjacencies of parks and stage doors and coffee houses, is a piece of history that is absolutely real and absolutely present and absolutely happening, and that has almost no official record. What it has instead is this: the memory of the men who were there, the thing that Tommy Bird is doing with the carpet bag, and the imperfect dress in the circle of yellow candlelight. The thing that Henry Graves is doing every night in the blue silk, with the engineered hips in front of 3,500 people who only see the joke. The thing that you are doing every time you sit down at the mirror and watch the face begin to change and feel the particular settling that Henry described, the key and the lock, and understand that what you're doing is not just a performance, but a proof that the interval is real, proof that a person can stand in it, proof that someone stood here before you and will stand here after you, and that none of this is as invisible as it's been made to be. February. The spring programme takes shape. Barrett calls you into his office, which is a small room behind the stage that smells of cigar smoke and old scripts, and has a view onto the alley, which is not a romantic view, but is a practical one, and Barrett is a practical man. He has the watchful quality, and the quality of having made decisions. He tells you that there is going to be a new production in March. A burlesque in 3 acts with a specific female lead role that has been historically played by a woman. He's proposing to play it with a man. With you specifically. Not because it's a trick or a gimmick. He makes this clear with a specific emphasis of someone who wants his meaning to be understood. But because of the thing that the stage critic noticed. The thing that Mary Forrester noticed in the wing. The thing that Henry Graves has been watching from the back of the stage for 4 months. The thing underneath the comedy. He uses exactly those words. The thing underneath the comedy. He says, the audience knows it's a man. They've always known it. That's not the point, and it was never the point. The point is whether the person doing the thing believes the thing, or whether they're just performing belief. And the point is whether what they believe is something real that the audience can reach. You sit in the chair in Barrett's office and listen to this, and you are aware very specifically of the quality of what it means to be seen, not in the way that the room on Vere Street sees you, not the specific recognition of that world, but something parallel, a recognition of a real thing by someone who is looking for real things in performers, who's developed a professional eye for reality and has found it in something you didn't know was visible. Can you do it? He asks. Yes, you say. There is no hesitation. The question doesn't require hesitation. He nods. He looks at his desk. He looks back at you. It'll be a different kind of exposure, he says. The role is larger. The notices will specifically address you. If it goes well, there will be opportunities. If it goes badly, he pauses, but it won't go badly. He says this with the certainty of someone who has assessed a thing carefully and made a judgment, not with the false comfort of someone trying to reassure you. It is a real certainty based on evidence, and it steadies you. There's a catch, he says. You wait. The production requires someone specific for the male romantic lead, he says. Someone who can play the lead and also carry the comedy when the comedy requires it. I'm considering a young man named Charlton. You may not know him, he's been at the Adelphi. And I need the two of you to have a read-through before I commit to it. If the dynamic is wrong, the whole production is wrong. Do you understand? Yes. The dynamic I'm looking for is not the standard thing, not the standard Damon lead interplay where one person is the joke and one person is the love interest. I want something more genuinely equal, more real. The joke and the love story need to exist at the same level. The audience needs to believe in both simultaneously. He looks at you. This means Charlton needs to play the love story completely straight, not winking at the audience, not indicating that he's aware of the joke, fully committed to the premise, and you need to play the comedy while also fully committing to the love story, both at once. You know what this requires. You know it in your body. You felt it on stage, the nights when the thing underneath the comedy is most present, when the emotion is real, and the joke is also real, and the audience holds the two of them together without choosing between them. I can do that, you say. March. The read-through with George Charlton, who is 23 and has a quality of ease about him that is either natural or so perfectly practiced it's become natural, and who looks at the script with the attention of someone who understands immediately what's being asked of him. He plays the love story straight, not as a joke at the expense of the convention, straight as he would play it with a female actress, with the full weight of the romantic sincerity that the scene requires. And when he looks at you, at the constructed person across the table reading the female lines, he looks at the character, not at the irony of the character, not at the joke that exists outside the world of the scene. It is extremely disconcerting. You're not used to being looked at like that, across a rehearsal table in your ordinary clothes and face, without the construction of the character and the costume. Disconcerting. And also, something else. Something that pulls at the edges of the calculation you've been running, the constant management of what is safe and what is not. Because this particular feeling, in this particular context, in a rehearsal room in front of Barrett and the stage manager and a prompt, this particular feeling is the kind of feeling you've been managing carefully for 21 years. After the read-through, Charlton comes to find you in the corridor. He extends his hand. His grip is straightforward. Good work, he says. That scene in the third act, you found something in it I hadn't expected. The text is good, you say. The text is fine. What you did with it was yours. He goes. You stand in the corridor and breathe and think about what it means to be 21 years old and living on Catherine Street and 11 months into a city that has been very large and very difficult, and which has been giving you, gradually, things you didn't know you were going to need. The production opens in late March. The spring evening, the gaslights outside the Gaiety throwing their warm yellow up onto the Portland stone, the queue extending down the Strand in both directions, the flower sellers and the programme sellers and the cab horses standing in their patient accustomed way. You're in the chair at 5. Miss Clement works quickly and precisely, because she's always quick and precise, and because tonight she is focused in the specific way of someone who has made something and is sending it out into the world to be judged. The wig is new. Not brown this time, a different colour, a lighter auburn that was chosen specifically for the role and for the gaslight, and which, in the mirror, creates a face that you haven't quite seen before. The key and the lock, and then the other side of the lock, the thing you were looking for when you sat down, the character. Not a character you've played before, a new one. Someone you're meeting for the first time tonight, in this mirror, with the gaslight and the grease paint and the 2 months of rehearsal and the 21 years of your actual life all informing who she is. Henry Graves appears at your shoulder. He is fully constructed himself, a different character tonight, not his regular dame role, a supporting role in this production, deliberately smaller, because he has arranged it this way. He is here to support the production, to support you specifically. This is a thing he has done without explaining that he's done it and which you understand anyway. Ready, he says. In the mirror, the face that has been built over yours looks back at you. The constructed face, the interval. Yes, you say. And you are. The first act goes well. The second act goes very well. In the third act in the scene Barrett described, the love scene that has to be played simultaneously as comedy and as genuine romance, as joke and as real thing. The joke being the visible layer and the real thing being the thing underneath. In that scene, something happens. Charlton plays it straight, completely, fully, without winking. He looks at the character you've constructed and he finds the character real and responds to the character as real. And you, carrying the comedy in the scene, holding the joke that the audience can laugh at, you also play the love story real. You are in the interval. You are in the gap between the categories, fully present in that gap. And you're also fully in the scene, and the comedy is real, and the love story is real, and you are holding both of them simultaneously the way Henry said it could be done, the way Tommy Bird does something analogous in a different room with a different audience. The audience holds. You can feel it through the boards. The 3,500 people, and the way the attention changes quality when something real is happening on stage. Not the laugh, not yet. The held breath before the laugh, the in-breath, and then the laugh, and then the held breath again, because the scene isn't over, because something else is happening under the laugh, something the laugh is sitting on top of rather than replacing. Afterward, the curtain and the applause, back in the dressing room, the grease paint coming off in slow, careful strokes, the face returning. Miss Clement, who has stayed late, comes to look at the dress. She examines the back seam, which held through everything, and makes a noise of professional satisfaction. Well, she says. Well, you say. Henry Graves comes to the dressing room. He doesn't say anything. He stands in the doorway for a moment and he looks at you. at the face in the mirror, mid-transformation between character and person, the grease paint half removed, the wig on its stand, the light catching the rouge that's still on your cheeks. He looks at it the way he sometimes looks at a scene he's watched from the wings, with the complete attention of someone who's been looking at this kind of thing for 20 years and knows what he's seeing. Then he goes. That's all. He goes. And somehow that is more than anything he could have said. Patrick Sears finds you at the stage door. It's nearly midnight. The last of the audience has long gone. The street is quieter, the cabs thinning, the flower sellers packed up. The cold March air has an edge to it, but nothing like February. A quality of imminence in it. Spring not yet arrived, but present as a possibility, as a direction the cold is moving. There's a gathering, Patrick says. Same neutral tone as always. Same specific quality of neutral. The room. The room. You walk. You know the route now without thinking about it. The way you know the routes between the theatre and the lodging house, and the coffee stall on the Strand. The route to the house on Vere Street is part of your London now, as embedded in you as the other parts. Left onto the Strand, north through Covent Garden, through the neighbourhood where the fruit sellers set up in the mornings, and which smells of fruit even in the evenings when the fruit is gone. Just a ghost of it, sweet and slightly fermented. Connolly lets you in with the small nod of someone who has seen you often enough that your presence requires no ceremony. Up the stairs, through the door with its specific quality of soundproofing, into the warm yellow room. Tonight the room is different. You don't identify the difference immediately, where you feel it before you see it. The quality of the energy being slightly higher than usual, slightly more charged. Then you see Tommy Bird in the middle of the room, not performing, not with the carpet bag, just talking to three men in a circle, and you see that he's animated in a way that's different from his usual contained animation, and you cross the room toward him. He sees you, and something in his face changes. Not surprise, recognition, but a sharper kind. I heard, he says. What did you hear? I heard there was a scene tonight. Third act. I heard about the held breath. Word travels. It always travels. In a community that has no official channels, the informal channels develop an almost uncanny efficiency. Someone was in the audience. Someone told someone. It reached here before you did. What did you hear about the held breath, you ask? I heard, Tommy says carefully, that it was the real thing, not just the comedy, the real thing underneath. You look at him. His face is its ordinary face, the narrow, angular face, the restless quality. But there is something in his eyes right now that is not restlessness. It's something older and steadier. Yes, you say. I think it was. The room gathers around this. Not literally. People don't move toward you, don't form a circle, but there's a quality of collective attention, a quality of the room orienting slightly toward this conversation, the way a room will when something is being said that the room has a stake in. Charlie, who manages the logistics, is listening from 3 feet away with his back turned and his ear effectively toward you, which is his way of being part of conversations without being formally part of them. Henry Graves arrives. He must have come directly from the Gaiety, because he's still carrying the coat he wears after performances, the dark one, and he has the particular post-show quality of a performer who has just finished a night's work and is still slightly in the pitch of it, still running a degree or two above room temperature in their engagement with the world. He sees the quality of the room. He assesses it with his professional attention, the same attention he brings to scenes in the wing, to the shape of performances from the back of the house. He comes to stand at the edge of the conversation, not in it, not yet. Tell me what you felt, Tommy says. He means on stage. He means in the scene. You think about how to say it, about how to be accurate rather than just evocative. I felt, you start. Both things at once, the comedy and the love story, equally real. Not one sitting on top of the other, not one being the cover for the other. Just both, present simultaneously. And the audience felt it. The audience held it. 3,500 people held something they didn't have words for and still felt was true. Tommy nods. His hands are still. The restless hands are still. That's what it is, he says. That's the thing. That's what we're all... He gestures around the room, around the 60 men in the yellow light. That's what all of this is, isn't it? Proving it's real. That the thing in the interval is real. That it's worth... He stops, starts again. That it's worth standing in. Henry Graves speaks. From where he's standing, slightly apart from the conversation, his voice quiet enough that it's meant for this circle rather than the room. Every night, he says, for 20 years, every night I go out there and the joke is real and the thing underneath the joke is real and 3,000 people get the joke, and somewhere in the house, somewhere in the dark, there are people who get both. He looks at the room, at the 60 men in it. This is the room where both get received, he says. Every time, without question. This is where it's all of what it is. Silence. The good kind. The kind that means something has been said that the room needed to hear. Then someone laughs. Not a laugh at the silence. Not a dismissive laugh. A warm one. The laugh of relief that comes when something true has been said out loud and doesn't need to be protected anymore, and the room comes back to itself. The conversations resume. The warmth returns. Tommy Bird starts talking about something ordinary, the tailor's shop, a customer, a coat, and the room leans in to hear about the coat because it's funny and he tells it well, the specificity of his observations, the warmth of his way of telling it. You stand in the room on Vere Street in March of 1887 and you hold both things. The scene that just happened at the Gaiety, the 3,500 people, the held breath, the laugh, the real thing underneath. And this room, these 60 men, the yellow light, the carpet bag in the corner, the name William Dorset passed down through the years, the name Ben from Whitechapel with the voice people couldn't forget, passed down through the years. You are 21 years old. You're from Salford. You have been in London for 11 months, and you have found, gradually over the course of those 11 months, the thing you ran toward when you left. Not only the stage, though the stage is real and the stage is yours, the other thing, the room, the specific recognition of the room, the community that has no official name and no legal status and no public acknowledgement, and which is, in spite of all of that, or perhaps because of all of that, because the difficulty of maintaining a thing invests the thing with the specific value of what has been maintained despite difficulty, which is the most real community you have ever been part of. London continues outside, March and cold, and the gas lamps in the streets, the cabs making their circuits, the river moving in its perpetual direction. Somewhere a church bell. Somewhere the morning is preparing to arrive. Not yet. Not for hours. But the night is not permanent. And you've learned that the night is not permanent. And this is a fact that cuts both ways. It means the room will end. The warmth will end. Connolly will eventually come to the stairs and say quietly that it's time, and people will go back to their ordinary lives, to the solicitor's office and the tailor's shop and the stage door on Exeter Street. But it also means that tomorrow the room will come back, some version of it, some form of the community that finds a way to persist because the need persists, because the need has persisted through raids and laws, and the Society for the Reformation of Manners and the Labouchere Amendment, and every other official mechanism that has been applied to a thing that cannot be unmade by official mechanisms. The room will come back. The Tuesday evenings and the Wednesday evenings and the Saturday mornings and all the careful adjacencies in between. Tommy Bird will carry the carpet bag. Henry Graves will stand at the back of the room and watch with his whole face. Charlie will manage the logistic with the quiet efficiency of someone who understands that logistics are safety, and you will be there. You will be there. The spring comes the way it always comes, with the quality of surprise that spring manages even in a city where you know it's coming and have been waiting for it. The quality of the air changing, the particular quality of March light that is different from February light in a way that is hard to describe and entirely unmistakable, a quality of possibility in it, of things not yet determined that might still be determined in any direction. The production runs for 6 weeks. The stage notices are good. The Daily Telegraph notices are very good. There is a critic in the Illustrated London News who writes about the third act scene in language that is, for a theatrical review in 1887, unusually specific about what he's trying to describe. Something about the quality of conviction in the performance. Something about the way the comedy and the emotion are genuinely simultaneous, rather than one masking the other. And who doesn't quite have the vocabulary to say what he means, but gestures toward it with enough accuracy that Henry Graves reads it and says very quietly, he almost got it. Barrett extends the run. 2 more weeks. Then a week off, a renegotiated contract, then a new production in the autumn. The new production will require you to take a larger role again. Not larger in the sense of more stage time, but larger in the sense of more weight, more reality. You are becoming something. It is happening slowly and certainly, the way things happen when they're real, without announcement, without a single moment you could point to and say, there, that's when it changed. Just the accumulation of performances and rehearsals and dressing room conversations and Tuesday evenings and the specific education of being looked at by audiences and communities and colleagues and seeing what reflect back. You are becoming a performer. Specifically the kind of performer who does the thing underneath the comedy, who occupies the interval, who makes the interval real. You're also becoming a person who lives in 2 worlds simultaneously, the stage world and the hidden world, the official life and the life in the rooms, and who has begun to understand that these 2 worlds are not separate from each other, not accidentally or coincidentally adjacent, but are in a specific and meaningful relationship, are feeding each other, the courage of the stage feeding the room, and the recognition of the room feeding the stage, in a circuit that goes in both directions without stopping. This is the life. This is what it looks like. Spring in London, the evenings lengthening, the Strand busier in the late afternoons, the flower sellers with different flowers now, tulips, daffodils from the market gardens south of the river, a brightness of colour in the grey streetscape. You walk to the theatre in the evenings through air that no longer requires you to hold your coat closed against the cold. The river on the days when you walk across a bridge, Waterloo usually in the early evenings, has a different quality of light on it, a spring light, more direct, more gold. Patrick Sears has a new position. Not at the Gaiety, a different house, the Alhambra in Leicester Square, which does a different kind of entertainment, more variety, more spectacle, less narrative burlesque. He's dancing in the core, working toward a featured spot. You see him on Tuesday evenings and occasionally in the parks, where you walk together in the careful adjacency way. Two young men walking in a park, nothing specific about it, nothing that any casual observer would attend to. He tells you, one afternoon in St. James's Park, with the pelicans on the water and the spring light making everything slightly golden, that there is a house in Clerkenwell, a different one from Vere Street. Not a replacement, but an addition. Another room in another neighbourhood, run by a woman named Maud, who's been doing this longer than Connolly, and who has, according to Patrick, a ruthlessness about the logistics that makes Connolly look incautious. "Are you going to go?" you ask. "I might," he says. "There are men there who don't come to Vere Street, different circles, different parts of the city." He looks at the pelicans. They are objectively extremely strange birds, and they make London feel slightly hallucinatory, which is an effect London can achieve without much assistance. "The more circles there are," he says, "the more places there are for people to find. And finding, that's the thing, isn't it? The finding. It is the thing. The finding." The moment you walk through the door on Vere Street for the first time and the management stopped, and the vertigo came, and you understood that the thing you'd been carrying inside you, in its careful management for 21 years, was not, had never been, invisible to everyone, that there were people who saw it and recognized it, and had been waiting, in their own way, for you to arrive. The autumn production opens in October, 1 year since the blue dress with the ruching. The reviews are better. Barrett has the expression, when he speaks to you after the first week, of someone whose professional assessment has been confirmed. Mary Forrester comes to you after the third performance of the autumn run. She finds you in the corridor between the dressing rooms and the stage. She's in her principal boy costume, which she wears with the total ease of something she's been wearing all her life. "I want to ask you something," she says, "and you can say it's none of my business." "Ask." "The thing you do," she says, "the thing underneath, where does it come from?" You consider this. How to answer it truthfully to someone who is asking sincerely. From knowing what it's like, you say, to be not quite one thing or the other, and finding that the place that's not quite one thing or the other is real, is its own place, not just the gap between two categories, but an actual place. She looks at you. Her face is doing the thing it does when she's actually attending to something. Very still, very present. The energy she usually uses for movement redirected into reception. "You go somewhere on Tuesday evenings," she says. "I've noticed." There it is. The specific danger of being noticed by someone you hadn't noticed noticing. You feel the familiar sharpening of attention, the calculation, the assessment of what is safe to say. But this is Mary Forrester, who has been in the theatre for 6 years, who moves through its geography with an orientation that suggests she knows more of it than you do, and who is looking at you right now with an expression that has nothing in it of judgment. "Yes," you say carefully. "Don't," she says. "Don't be careful with me. I'm asking because..." She pauses. "I know something about not quite one thing or the other, in my own way, and I'd like to understand your way." You look at her. The corridor is empty. The sounds of the stage from one end, the sounds of the dressing room from the other. "There's a room," you say, "where people, certain people, can be entirely themselves, without the management, without the careful calibration." And you go, "Yes." She's quiet for a moment. That sounds, she says carefully, like the most important room in London. It might be. She nods. Something settles in her that has been unsettled. Some question answered. Good, she says. Carry on then. And she goes back toward the dressing room, and you stand in the corridor for a moment, and then you go back too. There are things the history books will tell you about this era. The Cleveland Street scandal in 1889, 2 years from where you stand, which will send specific men fleeing to France, and will put specific names in newspapers in language of very controlled horror, and will make the geography of the rooms temporarily smaller and the logistics temporarily more complicated for the people inside them. And then, 6 years from now, 1895, the trial of a man whose name you know because everyone knows it. A man who puts words around things that are usually left without words, whose wit is so sharp that London has been using it to cut things for a decade, and will do so for a century more. The trial that will be a catastrophe in one register, and, in another register, somehow a crystallization. A making visible, a forcing into language of things that had been managed in the spaces between language for so long. You don't know any of this yet. You're in 1887 and you're in the room on Vere Street on a Wednesday evening, and the room is warm and Tommy Bird is performing. He always performs on the evenings you come now, because your presence and his have become part of the evening's texture. The gravitational relationship between two people who have found each other in the way the room allows, and the room is listening. Tommy sings. He sings a song you've heard in the halls, a song a professional woman sang it, a woman in a feathered hat in a Leicester Square variety show, and he sings it from inside it, from the real place of it. And the room holds the way a room holds when something real is happening. 60 men breathing together, the candles casting their warm circles, the curtained window keeping the city out. You are warm. You're in a room where you do not have to manage anything. Your hands are at your sides, and they are still. Around you, the men who find each other every week in this room, the men who know each other through the careful network of adjacencies and stage doors and park walks, and specific kinds of quiet conversations at specific corners. Around you, these men are breathing and listening and being entirely themselves. This is the thing that will not be in most of the histories. This warmth, this room, the 60 men breathing together in the yellow light. The carpet bag with its broken clasp repaired with wire. The flowers in the vase near the door. The sound of Tommy Bird's voice doing something true with a song that was written without him in mind. Making it his. Making it something that the room can receive and hold and keep. The room is real. The room has always been real. The room will go on being real through all the raids and the law changes and the newspaper scandals and the courtrooms. It will be real in different buildings and under different names and with different logistics managed by different men and women who understand what the logistics actually protect. It will be real for longer than any of the laws that try to unmake it, because the need is real. The need has always been real. The need to be in a room where the management stops, where the interval is visible and recognised and celebrated and not required to justify itself. This is what has been true since Mother Clapp's house in Field Lane. This is what was true for William Dorset in Bermondsey in the 1850s, singing with a voice people couldn't forget. This is what is true for Tommy Bird with his carpet bag and his imperfect dress and his restless hands going still in the circle of the candlelight. It is true for you, Thomas Albright, 21 years old, from Salford, thin and warm and standing in a room in London in 1887, fully yourself for the first time since you don't know when. For the first time, maybe in the precise way that this room makes possible, the management stopped. The hand still, the breath easy. The song ends. The room comes apart in its particular warm way. Somebody is crying. James the solicitor's clerk again, in the unashamed way he has been crying at these evenings since long before you arrived. The way of someone who has simply decided that this room is a room where crying is allowed, and has been right about this decision every time. Patrick Sears is laughing about something with a man you don't know well yet, a man who was introduced last month as a bookkeeper, who comes alone and leaves alone, and in between sits in the chair near the door and watches everything with the careful attention of someone making a decision he hasn't fully made yet. A decision about whether this room is safe enough to be in, and whether the safety is worth it. He's still here. He keeps coming back. The decision is already made, even if he doesn't know it yet. Henry Graves is here tonight, at the back. He is doing the thing he does, watching the whole shape of the thing from the position that lets him see it completely. His face, in the yellow light, is what his face is when he is most himself. Watchful, warm, tired in the specific way of someone who's been working hard at something that matters for a very long time and finds the work entirely worth the tiredness. He catches your eye across the room. He nods. Just that. The same nod he gave you in the dressing room on the opening night of the autumn production. The same nod he gave you in the coffee house when you told him about the first time you went through the door on Vere Street. The nod that contains, in its single small motion, the entire economy of what it means to be seen by someone who understands what they're looking at. You nod back. The room continues. The conversations, the warmth, the candles. Charlie, somewhere in the middle of it, managing the invisible logistics that keep the room a room rather than a record. Tommy Bird talking to someone in the corner with his hands in motion again, the restlessness reasserting itself now that the performance is done. The bookkeeper in the chair by the door watching everything with his careful eyes. Outside, London goes on being London. The March streets and the cold that's gone from February's hard cold to something more tentative. A cold that is already thinking about giving way. The river moving in its perpetual direction. The gas lamps on the bridges throwing their circles into the water. The cabs making their circuits. In the morning you will go to the Gaiety. You will sit in the chair at 5 and Miss Clement will pick up the greasepaint base and work it in slow, precise strokes, and your face will begin to change and you will watch the change in the mirror and wait for the moment, the key and the lock. And when the moment comes, you will feel it as much as see it. And then the performance, the stage and the lights, and the 3,500 people in the dark, reaching toward the thing on stage that they can see, and the thing underneath it that they can feel without knowing what to call it. And then, on the right evening, the room, the stairs, the door, the warmth and the yellow light, and the 60 men and Tommy Bird in the circle of the single candelabra doing something true with a song that wasn't written for him. Both things, simultaneously, the stage and the room, the visible and the hidden, the joke and the thing underneath the joke, the category and the interval, the official life and the life that has no official recognition, and which is, in spite of that, or because of it, as real as anything you have ever known. You are 21 years old. You are from Salford. You're in London, and you are learning every day in the specific way of someone who has found the thing they came for without knowing what to look for, how to be fully what you are in the full complexity of what that means. Some things are safe, some things are not. The calibration continues, the management continues, in the daylight world, on the streets, at the stage door. But here, in the room, for these hours, The management stops. And the stopping is everything. The candles burn lower. People begin to leave in ones and twos, the way people always leave these rooms. The careful dispersal, not all at once, not in a way that draws attention to the fact of having been together. Coats put on, quiet farewells, the specific economy of departure in a place where departure must be managed as carefully as arrival. Tommy Bird puts the dress in the carpet bag, folds it with the particular care of someone who has made something and wants it to last. The hat on top, the clasp closed, the wire holding. He looks at you. Next week, he says. Next week, you say. And you go out into London, into the March night, the cold air, the gas lamps, the streets you know now, the route you know now, the city that has been, over 11 months, gradually becoming yours. You walk quickly, head down, coat closed, unremarkable. Just a young man on a street in London late at night, going home, inside, warm, the thing in the interval, real and present, and yours, the church bell somewhere, marking an hour, the sound moving through the streets, and the stone buildings and the cold air moving through the city that has been hearing church bells for centuries. The river below the bridges moving in its perpetual direction toward the sea. You walk home, the lodging house, the stairs, the attic room, Arthur snoring on his back, George with his complete absence from the world, the ceiling with the water-stained dog which you find in the dark by where you know it is rather than by seeing it. You lie down, you don't undress, you're too tired for that. The straw mattress with its familiar dip, the thin blanket, the sounds of Catherine Street, quieter now, 2 a.m. or thereabouts, the taverns closed or closing. You close your eyes, the room is still in you, not as a memory yet, too recent for that, too present, still as a warmth, the 60 men and the yellow light. Henry Graves's nod across the room, Tommy Bird's hands going still in the candlelight, James crying without apology. The bookkeeper in the chair by the door deciding, without quite knowing he's decided, to come back. The room is real. You're in it even now, on the straw mattress on Catherine Street even now. Both things at once. The interval occupied. The gap between the categories inhabited. The thing that has no official name and no legal status and which has always been as real as anything that has a name. You close your eyes, the city fades, the way it does when you're truly tired enough that the city's noise becomes ambient, becomes part of the texture of rest rather than an intrusion on it. You've been here long enough to sleep through the city now. You've been here long enough that this city is home. The candle on the windowsill, Arthur's candle, that he always leaves burning slightly too long, gutters and goes. The room is dark, soft dark, London dark, never quite total because there's always a lamp somewhere, always a glow from the street below, always the faint light of the city breathing. Your hands are at your sides. They are still. Here is what the history books won't tell you, but what is true. The room on Vere Street and the room in Bermondsey, and the room in Clerkenwell that Patrick Sears will find, and the rooms in 100 other streets in 100 other years, those rooms were not footnotes. They were not minor or peripheral or secondary to the history of this city and this century. They were where something essential happened. Something that could not happen anywhere else, under the conditions that existed, in the time that existed. The accumulation of real moments in rooms where real things were permitted to occur. The performance at the Gaiety was real. The audience in the dark, reaching toward the stage, was real. The 3,500 people and the held breath, and the thing underneath the comedy, real. And the room on Vere Street was real. The 60 men, the yellow light. The name William Dorset passed down through the decades. The name Ben from Whitechapel with the voice. Tommy Bird with the carpet bag. Henry Graves at the back of the room. All of it real. All of it part of the same history. All of it. The visible and the hidden. The stage and the room. The joke and the thing underneath. All of it true. You, on the straw mattress in the attic room on Catherine Street, 21 years old from Salford in London in 1887. You're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough for now. You have a roof and a trade and a community and a room where the management stops. You've earned this rest. Centuries will pass. The gaslight will give way to electric. The streets you know will be renamed or widened or demolished and replaced with something else. The gaiety will be torn down, rebuilt, changed beyond recognition. The Labouchere Amendment will be repealed. Eventually. Not soon enough. Not nearly soon enough. But people will still find each other. Still find the rooms. Different addresses, different logistics. Still build the communities that have no official name and which are real anyway. Still stand in the interval and find it real and inhabited and worth the standing in. Still walk through doors in the dark to rooms where the management stops and the hands go still, and the warmth is the warmth of 60 people who have found each other in a city that doesn't officially accommodate them. Some things don't change. The need doesn't change. The room doesn't disappear. It moves. It adapts. It persists. Because the people in it persist. Because people like Tommy Bird carry their carpet bags through the streets of London in every century and find the door and walk through it and stand in the light and do the true thing. Because people like you persist. 21, from Salford in London, learning what you are and where it lives and how to carry it through the daylight world and the gaslit performance and the hidden room and the walk home in the dark. All of it yours, all of it real. Let sleep come now. Let the room on Vere Street be what it is, warm and yellow and real, somewhere in the city while you sleep. Let Tommy Bird carry his bag home across the river to Bermondsey. Let Henry Graves walk the long route back to wherever it is he goes. At the end of the evenings he doesn't speak of. Let the city breathe. Let the river move. Let the bells mark whatever hour it is, marking time the way they've marked it for centuries, for the living and the sleeping and the ones who are walking home through the dark streets with the warmth of the room still in them. Let it all be. You've been here 11 months. You've found what you came for. More than what you came for, more than you knew to look for. The stage and the room, the visible and the hidden, the joke and the thing underneath the joke. Both things, simultaneously, real. The straw mattress, the thin blanket, the dark ceiling with the water-stained dog that you find every morning and feel the relief of. Sleep now. The morning will come. It always comes. And the chair at 5 and Miss Clement and the grease paint and the key finding the lock and the 3,500 people in the dark. And then Wednesday. And then the room. And then all of it again in the endless circuit that is a life lived in both worlds, carrying both things, standing in the interval that is real and yours and inhabited and, in spite of everything, against everything, despite the law and the risk and the careful management and the calibration of what is visible and what is not, worth it, entirely worth it. Rest now. Good night.